Okay, we're on.
Okay, GE was making heated flying suits for the Air Force because it gets cold up at 30,000 feet. And we were testing these in their cold room, which went down to 40 degrees below zero. And we would sit in there for about 4 hours at a time while some sadist outside ran the temperature up and down. They, the way they figured the temperature was correct was they froze us for a while, and when we complained, then they burned us up for a while, and when we complained, they plotted that point. And then they took the average between the hot and cold complaints. They felt this gave them a more accurate reading of where comfort might be, because comfort is a variable term. You can get comfortable over a wide range, but if they run you back and forth like this, the average comes out about right. Then from the flying suit job, I moved into a quality assurance job for gun control equipment for B-29s and, or B-19s, so before the 29, B-19s and some of the fighter planes. We checked over all the gun controls that went out and made sure the wiring was in the right place and none of the wires were broken or none. Then from Bridgeport I moved to Schenectady. In Schenectady I worked on the large turbine test. We were testing large turbine. GE was the first company in the world to do production testing of turbines. We had 4 test stands, and we'd mount the turbines on the test stands, run them up to speed, make sure they produce the electricity they were supposed to, and check the balance. Occasionally we would get a turbine which would not balance. Maybe the shaft was bent or something, and we would test that for 2 or 3 days. We had a day shift and a night shift, and we would test it on the day shift, and then the night shift would check our results. And if we couldn't get one to balance after 3 or 4 tries, we'd send it back to the factory to see what was wrong with it. That was 3 months, 12 hours a day. 6 days a week. From there I went to circuit breaker test. Circuit breaker test was out in the open on the banks of the Mohawk River, and this was winter time. So we were freezing circuit breakers. We'd spray ice on them and freeze them, and then see if the mechanism was strong enough to break the ice. And sometimes it wasn't. And for this, we worked with very high voltage, and then one of my jobs was starting up the big high inertia machine. We had a machine with about a 15-foot rotor, which would generate very high inertia so that when we slammed the short circuit load on it, it wouldn't completely stall. And I got to go in early every morning and start that up. After 3 months on circuit breaker test, the FBI came in and said they were going, that anyone under 22 could not get a a deferment anymore. We were going to be drafted. And we asked what their alternative was, and they said, we've got this plant down in Tennessee. We can't tell you where it is or what it does, but we'll get you down there and we'll give you a 10-cent an hour raise, and you won't be drafted. And one of our bright guys wanted to know what happened if we choose not to take their generous offer. And they said, you'll be drafted, sent to Louisiana for 3 months basic training, and then you'll be sent to this unnamed plant as a buck private, to work at a buck private pay, doing exactly what you would have done if you had gone down to work as an engineer with us. Well, I knew where the plant was because I lived close to there. And I had, despite the wartime secrecy, word got out. So I knew where I was going. I was going home. And I didn't know what I'd be doing, but I figured it'd be better than running around in the mud in Louisiana for 3 months. So I went to, by that time I was married. I forgot that important part. As soon as I got out of Georgia Tech, I went down to Florida, and Edna and I got married, took the train to Schenectady. So she stayed with my family while I went down to Oak Ridge and got settled in and finally got a house. The Army supplied everybody with nice little prefab houses, which were very well done, well furnished, and new appliances. It was much better than the rooming houses we'd been living in Schenectady. At Oak Ridge, my first job was on the isotope separation plant, which had been set up by Caltech, not Caltech, University of California. They had converted a cyclotron, essentially cut it in half to half a cyclotron. And if you accelerate charged atom through a magnetic field, it travels in a circular path. So in the semicircular path, it describes a circle, which is dependent on the mass of the atom. So when we accelerated uranium-238 and 235, they described slightly different paths, and you could pick them off at the top end about 6 inches apart, and thus separate the 235 from the 238.